you may know him as the skeptical judge on the TV show The One, the search for Australia's most gifted psychic, or as the host of the weekly podcast The Skeptics, which is now in its 14th year. But he's also an origami expert, CSI fellow, and life member of the Australian Skeptics. For the past 20 years, Richard Saunders has painstakingly compiled thousands of predictions of Australian psychics. And with a substantial data set and a team of online researchers, what conclusions can we draw about these dubious claims? Has anyone nabbed the Skeptics' $100,000 prize? Richard, I'm going to hand over to you so you can tell us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joe Veneman. What a delight it is to see you. Joe and I have known each other for many years, and it's just wonderful to interact with you once again on another skeptical adventure. Well, folks, here we go. As I like to say, at long last, it's the results of the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. This has been something I've been doing together with invaluable help, and we'll get to that later, with a team for, well, roughly 12 years. So the whole idea was to do a proper investigation into the claims of psychics. Can they really predict the future or not? We wanted to know. And I'll just click my screen. There it is. So we are investigating the claims of being able to foresee future events. That was the core. We've heard it all before. People like Nostradamus and whatever credited with being able to see future events and warn us or tell us what is to come. And to me, it's close to my heart because it's a classic of skepticism, like monsters and UFOs and talking to the dead and Ouija boards and all that sort of stuff. And it's very important to remember, the project is not a mission about debunking. We did not set out to prove our point of view. We set out to investigate and see where the data took us. That was the important thing. And it was not a mission to see, it was a mission to see, whether people can foresee the future or not. It wasn't a mission to say they can't foresee the future and we're going to prove that they can't do it, so there. So that was not the attitude, it was not the spirit, if I may use that word, of the whole exercise. Very important to remember that. That's better. And something that we should keep in mind is Ray Hyman here, who I've had the pleasure of meeting on a number of occasions. For those of you who may be interested, he's the same age as James Randi. Well, they were born about the same year. And when Randy was with us, they were about as tall as each other. So they're both tiny little guys. But what a giant he is in many other ways. Hyman's maxim here: do not try to explain something until you are sure there is something to be explained. Very important to remember that too. And that can apply to all sorts of skeptical investigations. And to that end, we're not terribly interested if people claim to be able to see foresee the future in the stars or the cards or through divination, through whatever means, tea leaves, whatever, or through spirit guides or angels or the voice of God or interpretations. That's interesting, to be sure, but we must remember Hyman's maxim. Until we have established that people can actually see future events, then it's not much point in trying to figure out by what mystical method they are. We'll get to the first stage first. We have to determine whether they can do it, then we can move on to, well, it's the stars giving them the information, or spirit guides, or whatever the case may be. Now, of course, this thing has been very popular in newspapers for years and years and years, and television and so on. Here's just some examples from the last century about various things with Nostradamus. There's one with Princess Diana there, Prince Charles, Bill Clinton at the time, celebrities and royals and people of interest at the time, of course. That's what the predictions are based around. And when's that? 1994. They're looking at 1994. And various other things. Our future, what's in store, of a bit of a cross between religious and conspiracy theories and things like that. It comes around. it comes around. And indeed, here's a page from Australian Women's Weekly dated 1980. And in these sort of magazines, it's been popular for decades and decades and decades to devote time to various seers and fortune tellers, again, trotting out the famous people of the day. Malcolm Fraser, for example, and other people. And my goodness me, there's John Laws, and he's still going. You can still listen to John Laws on the radio. Who could have foreseen that in 1980? And again, here's an example from Chicago, the Chicago paper, where, again, it's just a common thing. What do psychics have coming up? People find it interesting to read. They usually forget about it soon after, but it fills up column inches in newspapers and so on. And there has been other, excuse me, groups around the world who have investigated claims of psychics and seers and whatever. And there's a great one from my dear, dear friends at the Bay Area Skeptics who did some of these in the 1990s. But I point out the little circle bits there. When it came to the press, of course, the angle they like to put is that skeptics are scoffing. You know, you silly psychics, we can prove you wrong. So they're called scoffing, they're called naysayers, which is a pity. Because the Bay Area Skeptics at the time, and I think they did this over a number of years, just set out to see, like this project, are the psychics wrong or right? Now, every year, and I dare say it's the same in New Zealand too, that TV shows, especially what we call the morning chat shows, love to have psychics and seers and fortune tellers come on, and we talk about celebrities, more or less. And there are some screenshots of various ones over the years. That one in the middle with Malcolm Turnbull, who was our former Prime Minister. On that occasion, the psychic there by the name of Sharina was telling Malcolm Turnbull he would never be Prime Minister. So that didn't work out too well for him. Well, it did, in a sort of funny way. The genesis of this idea, this whole project that I'm reporting about, came from a talk I gave at the amazing meeting in here in Sydney, Tam, Australia. And there's a picture which is dear to my heart with wonderful Joe Benamu and James Randi and I at in Las Vegas when we were spooking the upcoming amazing meeting in Sydney. But anyway, in 2010 at the amazing meeting, I gave a talk based around the predictions of only 1 year. And that was predictions for the year 2010. And they came from the pages of the Australian, or now I think it's called the International Psychics Directory. And that magazine's been now published for over a decade, I think. And every year, until recently, they had a section which would be what are Australia's top psychics and seers predicting for the year to come, which was a handy place for me to start collecting these predictions. And there's a typical page. Again, mostly concerned with celebrities. And there's Nicole Kidman right there near the top, and she features quite a lot, as we'll see later on in this whole project. But royalty, sprinkling with some things like I could foresee natural disasters or so on and so on. So in order to do this properly, I started to gather more and more psychic predictions from wherever I could. I have quite an extensive digital catalog of skeptical matter regardless. So I was able to trawl through those to find TV and radio interviews and wherever I could. Magazine newspapers, online newspapers, a great resource for me. And YouTube videos of psychics giving their predictions, their own websites. And there you can see just some of the screenshots, or shall I say photographs at the time, of various what we call women's magazines. And the two big ones here in Australia that carry this sort of thing, who love to promote psychics and all sorts of crazy stuff, Woman's Day and New Idea. And they don't come up very well on our programs such as Media Watch, which often take these magazines to task for publishing out-and-out nonsense anyway about famous people. There you are. The Prince of Wales is getting divorced, apparently some years ago. But my initial thought was, well, I'll just find some old copies of these magazines and I will see what I can find, and I'll use those as the basis of the project. Will contribute to the project. Maybe I can find some in waiting rooms or maybe behind the couch. But then it dawned upon me, to do this properly, I had to look at every page of these magazines in the years that the project covers. These are the year 2000 to 2020 inclusive, which comes to a period of 21 years in total. So I went to the State Library of New South Wales, where they have the original magazines in their files, and after several weeks of trotting in there and flipping through every page of in that case it was Women's Day in New South Wales and Sydney here, and then when I found an example of a prediction, I would catalogue it, copy it, and get it ready for later insertion into the database. But that wasn't good enough, because then I had to travel with the kind support of the Australian Skeptics. I travelled some years ago to Melbourne, where they have the New Idea magazine catalogued. And together with Steve Roberts, longtime skeptic, Dr. Steve Roberts, we would go to the State Library of Victoria in the morning, work all morning, finding these predictions, cataloguing them, copying them, taking photographs, go out and have a wonderful lunch, stagger back somehow and work all the rest of the afternoon. We did that for nearly a week, I think, to get through the volumes and volumes and volumes of that particular magazine. But what an enjoyable time it was. Always good to hang out with Dr. Steve Roberts, I promise you that. There's some typical things that these magazines publish. They're little boxes, little columns, and little things. And as you can see, it's heavily skewed towards celebrities. And in the case of Prince William there, you could categorize him as for these purposes, as a celebrity, although in the database, he's separated into the section under the royals. But that's just typical there of celebrities of the day. And of course, as I mentioned before, Nicole Kidman, and over the 2 decades of this project, her name comes up more often than anybody else. In fact, at last count, there was 94 predictions made about Nicole Kidman, her ups and downs and her future prospects and her love life, and will she win awards and what's she doing now. She was very overrepresented in this project. So this is what the database actually looks like. It's hard for me to really, zoom in on that too closely for you. Nevertheless, and it has 3,811 entries. That's staggering when I think about it. But we have the year for which the prediction is meant to be. We have the next column is the person who made the prediction, where it was published and when, for reference. We have the general topic. So in that case, we can see politics or sport. The main subject, which might be in politics, would be a politician or a political party or an election or something like that. In the case of the sport, the main subject would be the sporting event or the sporting character, personality. Then the wording of the prediction itself, which is 99 times out of 100, it's verbatim. Sometimes with long rambling predictions gathered from YouTube or something like that, we had to just get to the nub of the prediction for brevity. Otherwise, they just go on for line after line after line. The verdict, in our opinion, was the prediction right? Did it come true? Was it wrong? Was it too vague? Was it of a vague nature, or was it expected to happen? For example, we might get a prediction that says, I can foresee earthquakes in California. Well, yes, it's correct, but we put that under the category of, well, that's expected to happen. And the last column there is any explanatory notes that we might have needed along the way. Now, I could not have done this without the help of my friends all around the world. There we have Alethea Dean, Trishan, and Lara Benham at the time. I think this was in the year 2016, 2017. Lara, if you're watching at the moment, you may remember the year exactly. We gathered at the little apartment there of Trish in the middle, and with her dead friend, apparently, we spent many happy weekends pouring through early parts of the predictions, the years 2000, 2001, 2002, and so on. And that taught me a lesson, a valuable lesson, is that I needed help with this project. It was just too much. I could not have done it all. It's so much work, so much research needed to be done. So we'd get a prediction and we'd pour through it and see what the conclusions were. But more recently, since the middle of last year, for 72 weeks, I don't think we missed a week. I can't remember. We probably did not miss a week. We gathered online with a Zoom group headed up by Susan Gerbic, who will be speaking later today. Don't miss that. And we formed a little group, and we met for 2 hours, and we poured through and argued and examined and researched predictions. And by the time we finished, only a couple of weeks ago, it was very bittersweet, because this is something we've been doing every week, gathering as a team, a social group, laughing and chatting and arguing. So when it was all over and we said our goodbyes, we won't be doing this again, the very next week we were back tweaking the project. We couldn't help ourselves. Not everybody is represented in that picture who has helped us. And if you're not in that picture and you were part of that group, I apologize. But you do appear in the credits of the official report. And folks, the official report about this whole project will appear in the next issue of The Skeptic. It is extensive. What I'm giving you now is an overview for the methodology, for the people involved, for all sorts of things. Please see the report in the next issue of The Skeptic. But all those lovely people on the screen, you know how much I appreciate each and every one of you. So here we go. The final scores. Although, you know, we could tweak it in the future if more information comes to light. That's good science. However, at the moment, as I said, 3,811 predictions, with 399 only being listed as correct. The other category, so we got wrong, too vague, expected to happen, in a very, very tiny unknown where we simply couldn't get to the truth of the matter. As you can see there, over 3,000 is the vast majority, which means the correct number is 11%. Remember that. Remember 11%. It's very important. You could also flip that around and say, well, something around about, rounding it up, rounding it down, 90% of psychic predictions are not correct, do not come true. That's staggering. At the beginning of this, I wouldn't have thought it would be that huge of a gap or a ratio. There's a slightly better pie chart breakdown. You can see the majority are wrong, as you can see in red there, simply wrong. So if you come across a random psychic prediction, there's a better than 50-50 chance it's wrong, statistically. The correct is the bottom green there, which is bordering on 11%, 10.9, close to 11. But you can see the other two big slices of the pie, the too vague and expected. And they individually are bigger than the correct. And as I said before, very few are unknown. We just couldn't get to the truth of those. A bit frustrating. But how do you score these things? How do you score these things? This is the question that we debated and argued sometimes for a long time during our deliberations on any individual prediction. Obviously, there are some correct, which were easy to find. Did so-and-so marry so-and-so? Yes, tick, correct. Did this party win the political election? Yes, tick, correct, and so on. Then we've got, they were correct, but maybe they were just a 50-50 shot anyway, like a sporting team coming up to the grand finals of various sporting matches here in Australia, for example. We'd have people the day before predicting one team or the other would win. And although they may have been correct, it's still just a 50-50 shot. And one of the things I talk about, and we talked about in the project and in the report, is, well, how do you weigh that up against the prediction that is a real long shot, but it's also correct? These matters are addressed in the report. We've got expected, as I mentioned before, there will be earthquakes in California or something like that. Wrong. Did so-and-so marry so-and-so? No, they did not. Easy. That prediction did not come true. Wrong 50-50. Did the sporting team win? No, they didn't. It's wrong. Too vague. And I'll try to get to some more examples later if time permits. But too vague with things like, I feel there'll be great changes coming this year. Seriously, there were predictions like that. Many which were just too vague, to what we love to call, Adrian Hill, waffly predictions. Oh, another thing that the team really appreciated was learning about Australian politics and weather and slang. And their favorite term after all this was clucky, because one of the predictions talked about clucky Venus in somebody's star signs. For those listening internationally, you might want to look up the word clucky, cluck, cluck, cluck. And of course, at the end there, very few were unknown. I can hear Adrian Hill giggling now over the internet. Here are the topics, the top 10 topics, and some others there mentioned in the, or recorded in the project. As you can see, celebrities. Celebrities. A huge bulk of the predictions concern the lives, the loves, the ups and downs of celebrities. However, of all the predictions about celebrities, only 11% are correct. There's that number again, 11%. Popular other topics include politics, and the psychics did a bit better with politics, 19%. And well, we can wonder why that is, maybe because of a bit more educated guessing, possibly. Sporting events, 15%. The royals, 15% only. Queen Elizabeth II, no predictions made about her catalogued were correct. There you go. And as you can see there, a death in the royal family happened roughly every other year, or maybe a bit more during the run of the project. It's simply common to come across a prediction like, I can see a black flag flying over the Buckingham Palace, or a bad year for the Queen as somebody important dies. Now, bear in mind, the Queen and Prince Philip and other senior members of the royal family during that time early on was the Queen Mother and so on, elderly people. So to predict the death of elderly people is not a great long shot. Nevertheless, only with the royal deaths, only 15% correct. There were a couple during that time. Natural disasters were a big topic in the project, as you can see, but again, 5% correct, hardly anything at all. And terrorism and so on. Oh, Melbourne Cup. I wouldn't advise you rely on psychic advice for betting on the Melbourne Cup. They usually get it wrong. And Donald Trump. Donald Trump, there you are. 10% of predictions made about Donald Trump came true, including one. There was one prediction that didn't come true about Donald Trump, that from a very famous astrologer, Milton Black, who said he would be the best president in years and his cabinet would be transparent in glowing terms. Interesting. So every psychic, and I use the term psychic, it just means the people we've recorded in the database. It's just a shortcut for me to say psychic. It's just the easiest term for me to use. Every psychic in the database, we have the stats on them. And this will be published in full in the report, so people will be able to go through and see their favorite psychic and see how they scored. And from a statistician's point of view, this project is amazing. The stats you can pull out of it, it's just fascinating. However, if your favorite psychic is in this list, you can see how they did straight away. This is the top 10 as per entries made. Georgina Walker, popular psychic for the magazines, comes in with 277. I won't just bother reading through all those. You can see those for yourself. But if you glance over to the last column, where I've rounded the percentage to the nearest whole number, even the best, and we'll get to this if time permits, Milton Black, who was very difficult to work with, so to speak, to judge his predictions, long and rambling and long, was coming, even his is 21%, which means close to 80% of his predictions did not come correct. And we can see some of the others there. Again, look at those numbers. I mean, psychics often complain to the skeptics, oh, you expect us to be 100% right all the time. Well, no, we've never said that. That's a straw man. But honestly, we would expect you to be better than what the statistics show. Our wonderful Nicole Kidman, who, and I apologize for name dropping, I have worked near on a movie or two, and she is the complete professional, I can promise you that. There we go. Even with her, most predictions made about her are simply wrong. Although we have a slightly better hit rate for her predictions coming correct, but still, it's abysmal when you think about it, from what they claim to be able to do, to have these mystical powers to foresee the future. And as a sort of an exercise in 2017, or should I say at the end of 2016, I asked a group of skeptics and friends just to give me their predictions. I thought we have to have some sort of measure here. What would the average person in the street get if they were, well, to be honest, just guessing? And it turns out, and bear in mind, there's only 163 predictions, so this is more of a talking point. It's more of an interest. Nevertheless, the correct rate is 31%, which is somewhat better than the real psychics. And I point, here's that represented in the database, and I point just the little highlighted section there, the little red circle. That's one of mine, as it happens. I'm in there too. Maybe I shouldn't have marked my own scores. I don't know. And I've successfully there, at the beginning of the year, I successfully predicted that a certain sporting team, the Cowboys, would be in the grand final. Wow, that's amazing. How could I possibly known? Well, I got a deck of cards. I wrote the name of each sporting team on the cards, and I went shuffle, 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 shuffle. Oh, it's the Cowboys. Right, that'll be my prediction. And it happened to come true. I wonder if the real psychics do it that way. We've also included in the database, and this, as my friends watching from the team will well remember, this took a lot longer than you might suspect. We have 10 major world events from each year of the 2 decades listed, because these are big events that the psychics did not see coming. And you can see them there. I've got 9/11 terrorist attacks, and I've got the word contested. There are psychics out there who claim they saw these terrorist attacks coming. I don't have the original source. Now, what was very important for me is, if a prediction was to be entered into our database, I have to have on file, which I do, the original prediction as published. And for the people who have made various claims about predicting 9/11, I don't have those. This is something that we could revisit in the future, but at the moment, I don't have those original predictions. But nevertheless, 210 major events that psychics simply did not see coming, including smartphones, to be honest, or the COVID-19 pandemic, or again, some people claim they say that, but we don't think they did. Tsunamis and various things like that. And there we go. And this is a representation of that particular piece of work. As you can see, there's the year listed, there's the category, the subject, when it happened, and a list of that event, be it a flood, be it a tsunami, be it a famous person dying unexpectedly, or stuff like that. But as I say, and the team well know, that took a very long time. Strangely, was very difficult to do. Interesting, but difficult. So we predict, thank you, Tim Mendham, for suggesting I call this section Predicted Criticisms. We predict that there will be criticisms. Of course, the psychics aren't going to like the results of this. Here are some, excuse me now, they're going to say, well, you didn't take all my predictions into account. Well, we honestly collected as many as everyone's predictions as we could possibly find. It wasn't like we were deciding not to take all their predictions into account. We could be accused of cherry picking, only selecting for the database predictions that we thought were going to be wrong, where in fact we simply collected predictions, and we worried about whether they were right or wrong as we entered them in the database, and we were looking at them and we were scoring them. Or should I say, we entered them into the database, thousands of them, then we went back. So we didn't remove any because we didn't like them, because we thought they might be right. We might get the criticism that, you silly skeptics, wasting your time, this is just for entertainment. Well, I'm sure the magazine think they're entertaining and the TV shows, but the people writing these predictions, they claim they really can see the future. So this is a valid exercise. This is their claim. They claim they can see the future through psychic means. So in that respect, it's not for entertainment purposes only, and the psychic industry as a whole regard this as a reality, that their members can see the future. We might be accused of just being skeptics, and of course skeptics would say this. That's what we're not surprised. Well, we say what the results of the analysis is. If it was different, that's what we would say. And of course, it says we wouldn't produce a report that confirms psychic powers. Well, we would produce what the statistics say. Again, if the report confirmed that some people could see the future, we would report that. Then we'd get to, well, how are they doing it? But we didn't get that far because the report does not suggest that they can see the future. And you won't change anything. Psychics will still appear on TV and in the magazines and radio. Yes, they will. They absolutely will. We've learned after a long experience that no matter how we present the information, no matter what we do, there'll be still people out there saying, well, I can do it anyway. Oh, come on my TV show. We know that. We know that. We realize that. No false illusions there. Oh, shall I do it? You cannot change the laws of physics, Jim, says Mr. Scott in Star Trek. One of the side points in the project, and something I cover in the official report, is that as far as we know, information cannot be sent backwards in time. And in order for these psychics and seers and mystics to foretell events, somehow the information about that event must have traveled backwards in time to be interpreted by them. Does that mean that all future events are all traveling backwards in time? It's a fascinating little side diversion. And of course, but they'll get back to us and say, well, it doesn't work like that on the spiritual plane. Okay. Well, we haven't got to establish yet that it works at all, let alone on the spiritual plane. But that's often an out by psychics. They say, well, science can't test this. It doesn't work like that in the world of spirit. Okay. So remember the 11%. And I don't know if this is going to end up anywhere, but I quite like to think that 11% should now be known as Saunders' law of predictions. Or maybe I should call it psychic predictions. Anyway, given enough data points, in this case predictions, the number of those that are correct will fall around 11%, with the remainder being either too vague, expected, wrong, or unknown. And then we can see a breakdown of the 2 decades involved, and each time the scores, the correct is came to 11%. And reasonably early on in the project, as I was collating things and the numbers were starting to grow and becoming statistically meaningful, this 11% sort of came along and didn't really go. It dipped and went up and down, but at the end of the day. So there you go. I should have a t-shirt with 11%. Maybe I won't. Here's the big conclusion. A 12-year investigation by Australian and international researchers, often arguing with each other, covering 3,811 psychic predictions made by 207 individuals in the database, finds that there is not sufficient evidence to conclude that people who claim to have paranormal or supernatural abilities can see into the future and predict events better than guessing alone. Now, this may be something you would expect to come out of a skeptical group. They'd probably just say the gist of this, but this is backed up by statistics. This is backed up by evidence. This is the conclusion of research and analysis. This isn't just us saying, oh, those psychics, I bet they can't do it. We don't think they can. Now we have a justified reason to say this appears to be the case. So for any budding psychics out there, if you want to gaze into the crystal ball or read the tea leaves, maybe you get messages from spirit. I always wondered who this spirit is. You often hear psychics saying, spirit is telling me, I'm getting spirit. Spirit doesn't want me to do this. Okay, I wonder who this spirit really is. The golden rule. Here's the tip for you all. The golden rule of predictions. Make many predictions. 100 every year. Just make as many as you can possibly think of. Make most of them a bit vague, a bit waffly, dare we say, with maple syrup. And then have a handful which are quite precise. This will happen on this day, or this town will suffer this cyclone in May, or whatever the case may be. And then after the year's gone by, review them and point out the ones that came true. Or in your way of thinking, you could shoehorn to sort of make true, or you could say, oh, no, that's what I really meant. This one's true after all. And indeed, there's a part of the report where I discuss psychics who go back and mark their own homework and are very generous when it comes to marking their own homework, very understanding and forgiving, to the point that one predicted that we would have anti-gravity devices and later decided, well, that was correct. I haven't seen any today. Anti-gravity, wouldn't that be nice? So to wrap up, a big thank you, and it will be with me for the rest of my life. The help, the necessary, vital, wonderful, fun, exasperating help I got from the team, and as many people as I could possibly remember and record are listed there. They're listed in the official report as the people who really made this happen. I was sort of just the captain of the boat, and they're all there rowing and pedaling and stoking the fire and doing whatever they had to do in their research, their friendship, their support over such a long period. I don't think any of us involved in this really understood the gravity. That's not the word I'm looking for. The breadth, the scope of this. It was just bigger than we could have imagined. Even when we were working on it, it just kept getting bigger and bigger. Those wonderful people, some online, some in person, some via email correspondence or whatever the case may be, even with some moral support there. I couldn't have done it without you. So for more information, as I said before, please prepare yourself and get the next issue of the Skeptic magazine. If you haven't subscribed, please do it, skeptics.com.au. And you can always listen to me on the Skeptic Zone podcast together with my wonderful team of reporters at skepticzone.tv. But for now, I'll wrap that up, and maybe, possibly, can I predict there could be even a question or two.
Well done, Richard. You have predicted correctly. In fact,
I'm
there's
shocked.
more than 2 questions.
All right.
Thank you for that excellent and interesting presentation. It's been really wonderful to see how, after all these years of collecting this data, where you've taken it. So I'm going to start here. So with a question from James Milton. With deep learning so accessible these days, is there a way to get AI to spit out a random unqualified prediction and compare it to that 11%?
Yes, and you're welcome to do it, because apart from anything else, I'm looking forward to not worrying about predictions for a little while, giving my brain a rest from this after 12 years. I think, though, in the not too distant future, some aspects of this may be revisited and tweaked and analyzed and whatever it is. But yes, I suspect that's possibly an interesting avenue of research, yes.
Fantastic. Okay, a question from Ken McLeod. How do you define expected as used in your pie charts?
Expected, yes. As I said before, things that are a complete no surprise to happen. I think I had a few examples. Okay, here's an example, and I do talk about this in greater detail in the official report. Somebody predicted in 2017 that their prediction was problems with railway services, and if their prediction was this year there will be no problems with the railway service. Mm-hmm. That would be an amazing prediction. But as it stands, well, yes, every year. There are predictions with railway services. Here's another one. I foresee large earthquakes happening. We've mentioned California before, but others would say I see large earthquakes happening in Mexico, China, and Japan. Well, they regularly suffer earthquakes. This is no surprise. So that manner of things, that vein of things. Now, this is one of the things that the team would often argue and debate for a long time. And that's why the project took so long. We get bogged down in one prediction, and some would say, well, this is obviously expected. Mm-hmm. And some say, well, I think it's too vague, but it did happen. So it's not as easy as one might think to do all this.
Okay. A question from Susan Gerbic, who'd like to know how important Wikipedia was in the research.
She would.
She would.
Yeah, Wikipedia was very important, and it provided us with, the good basic information. So, people often criticize other people for using Wiki as a term of research, but for some things it's absolutely fine, because if we were looking at the life story of an individual, then Wiki is a perfectly good source, because obviously this person got married at this stage. Their children are called this, and that was a large part of the results. So yes, Wiki was invaluable, but it was often backed up with other references from published reports in newspapers or other historical records. But
yes,
Wiki,
as we always say about Wikipedia, it's a very valid starting point. And
but for some things, it's for mundane things. It's.
All right, a question. Apologies if I've mispronounced this. It's Natalie or Nathalie. So the question is: of the correct predictions, which was the most impressive?
Good question. Very good question, with an interesting answer. And I'm just trying. I think I hopefully made a little note. One of the last things the team did was we went through every correct prediction to look for long shots, amazing, how could they see that coming? And we've hardly found any. But one of the ones that we've put under that is that somebody partly predicted terrorist attacks. They said there would be a suicide bomber in Canberra, and there would be a terrorist attack, if I'm remembering correctly, in Parramatta. Now, the terrorist attack, no suicide bombing, no suicides, no Canberra, so that was all wrong. But the bit that talked about Parramatta that year turned out to be correct, because it was determined that a poor gentleman who was working for the police department was shot by a youth who was motivated by terrorism. So we looked at that and thought, well, it would be what's the word? It would be a bit silly of us to say that's wrong, because it didn't all fit. So that was what we would consider a long shot. But honestly, there are very, very few, and we were surprised.
All right, so End of Road asks, how do you explain the better than 11% result from Skeptics predictions?
End of Road, I like that. Because it's statistically not there's only 136 data points to draw from, so we'd expect anomalies and bumps. If we did this as a group for 11 years, 12 years, 20 years, I would expect that correct rate would fall back towards around about the 11%. It's only because it was just a 1 year sample. So that's why I say, while it's an interesting thing in the project, it's more of a talking point, more of an issue we can discuss. It's not claiming that we would always get it better just without guessing. But in that situation we did. But it was an interesting exercise.
Okay, and Ian Bryce would like you to tell us about the unexpected earthquake.
Oh, right. True story. We were meeting on the team. We're all there on the video saying, oh, what's this prediction? And we were discussing earthquakes. Oh, here's one. So-and-so says there will be an earthquake. Oh, okay, let's Google that. Oh, was there an earthquake then? And we're all there working away. And Michelle Bickersma, who's a good friend of the Skeptical Fairy from the internet, Michelle Bickersma was there in Melbourne working away. And suddenly she's going, and she's saying, I think there's an earthquake. And all the rest of us, yes, of course, Michelle. No, really. And she stood up And we just didn't know what to think. As we were researching earthquakes, Michelle had an earthquake.
Oh my goodness.
And that's just one of the amazing coincidences that come across. But yeah, that was
well, especially given the fact that that was certainly an unlikely earthquake, unlike if it had happened, somewhere else in the world.
But I'll never forget that. While we were looking at earthquakes, one of us experienced an earthquake. So there you go. We should look up lottery winners more often. Maybe that would work.
I have a question for you. So, how often do their predictions cancel each other out? So, for example, psychic A predicting that politician A will win an election versus psychic B predicting that the same politician will lose that election. And how do they respond when they're challenged on those contradictions?
We'll find out. We'll find out, because I'm sure that will happen. But yes, there are. And I don't have that as a separate category, because the separate categories we could have in this database are many, and that's one that we haven't put together, but I guess we could. Oh yes, people, Hillary Clinton will win, Donald Trump will win. There's a great prediction here, and it's sort of akin to what you just mentioned, but the answer is yes. There are many predictions that cancel each other out, but they're all treated individually. Now, according to Sarah Yip here, writing in last year, who will win the US election? And she says, according to Sarah, the numerology shows that both Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden have a chance of winning.